He was just a small-town mechanic, worn boots, calloused hands, and a garage barely holding together. She showed up in a Tesla, quiet and composed, asking about a name no one had spoken in decades. That was the day everything started to change. Because sometimes what we think is long forgotten is only just beginning to matter. If you believe in second chances, small acts of kindness and stories that warm the heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a story that might just change your day. Now, let's begin. Poor mechanic fixed her car's tracking system, then found out she was a billionaire looking for him. The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky had that dull steel-gray weight that promised a storm before sunset. Jake Miller wiped his hands on a rag blackened with years of grease and memories. The garage smelled like motor oil, metal shavings, and goodbye. He stood in the center of it all beneath the flickering fluorescent lights surrounded by tool chests, oil drums, and the echo of a life he hadn't expected to end this way. The bank's final notice was duct-taped to the office door. 30 days overdue. The tow trucks would arrive in the morning to take whatever still had value. The rest, scrap and dust. He reached down and picked up a dented socket wrench lying beneath the workbench. His father's initials were still etched on the side, C.M. Carl Miller. Jake's throat tightened. His dad had built this place with his own hands, taught Jake everything he knew about engines and ethics often at the same time. Always fix more than the machine, his father used to say. Fix the doubt in the driver's mind, too. Jake swallowed hard. That voice had been gone for 6 years. Parkinson's had taken his father's strength first, then his speech, then everything else. A crash from outside jolted him back. The metal door rattled. Jake opened it slowly, expecting the wind, or maybe one of the local kids looking to salvage scrap early. But it wasn't that. A sleek silver Tesla Model X rolled quietly into the gravel lot. Strange. No one brought a car like that to his place. The woman who stepped out was equally unexpected, mid-30s raincoat sharp over tailored slacks, dark hair tied back her face unreadable. She didn't look like someone lost. She looked like someone arriving precisely where she meant to be. He stepped forward, wary but polite. "Can I help you?" She held up a small rectangular device, flat black like a custom-built GPS tracker. "This brought me here," she said, her voice calm, precise. "Are you Jake Miller?" Jake hesitated. "Yeah," she nodded, then glanced at the garage eyes scanning every surface like it was a museum she'd only ever seen in dreams. "I think your system's malfunctioning," Jake said, gesturing to the device. "This isn't the kind of place you put in your Tesla's navigation. It's not a Tesla system," she replied. "It's mine." Before Jake could respond, a gust of wind blew her hair across her cheek. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, held out the device. "I built a tracker," she continued, designed to locate behavioral data patterns rather than fixed addresses. "My software didn't look for where I wanted to go. It looked for who I was looking for." Jake blinked. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong guy." She stared at him, steady and strangely vulnerable. 21 years ago, she said softly, there was a girl, 11 years old, alone. It was raining. She'd been sleeping behind a gas station for 3 nights straight. You gave her a blanket, a can of soup, and a place to warm her hands. Jake's heart missed a beat. She added, "You also wrote your name and the address of this garage on a paper napkin, with a silver pen." The memory hit him not like a thunderclap, but a fog lifting all at once. A rainy night. A girl too thin for her coat. He'd been 17, working alone after school. She was trembling, hiding behind the dumpster. He hadn't asked questions, just offered soup and a blanket. When she refused a ride to the shelter, he wrote his name down, just in case. "You're her," he said, almost in disbelief. She nodded. "My name's Elena Reyes." Jake leaned against the doorframe, stunned. I didn't even think you remembered. I didn't forget." She said, then paused. "I built my entire career on remembering. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A truck rumbled by on the highway in the distance. The sky darkened another shade. Jake cleared his throat. "You should know, this place won't be here tomorrow. I'm closing down. Bank's taking it. I know she said." Jake narrowed his eyes. "How I'm part of the board at Ardent Capital," she said. "The real estate subsidiary handling this acquisition is mine." Silence dropped between them like an anvil. Jake's voice turned hard. "So you're here to apologize? To make yourself feel better?" "No," Elena said evenly. "I'm here because I just found out what was happening, and I'm here because I have a choice." Jake folded his arms. "What kind of choice to reverse the deal?" she said. "To give this place back to you, or rebuild it with you, or make it something better, something that helps more people like you helped me?" Jake didn't respond. The rain finally began tapping soft against the Tesla, the roof, the old rusted tools inside. He looked at her and didn't see a CEO. He saw the girl from that night, only now she was offering something far greater than a thank you. She was offering redemption. For both of them. But he wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, he turned away. "I have to check on my mom. She's not well." Elena nodded as if she already knew. She held his gaze one last time. "When you're ready," she said, "I'll still be looking." She got back in the Tesla and drove off, her taillights glowing red in the rain. Jake stood there long after she was gone, the storm rolling in behind him. In his hand, he still held the old socket wrench. Only now, it felt like the beginning of something he hadn't dared imagine in years: hope. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm by the time Jake closed up the garage. He locked the side door, pausing to glance once more at the gravel driveway where the Tesla had sat just moments earlier. The puddles shimmered in the muted light from the flickering lamppost overhead. He shook his head as if trying to dislodge a dream that had clung too tightly. Elena Reyes. That name, her face, and that strange device, it all felt unreal. But the memory she'd evoked wasn't. He could see it now, clearer than ever. A shivering girl with tear-streaked cheeks and torn sneakers hiding from the world behind a dumpster. He hadn't thought about her in decades, but now it all came rushing back. He stepped inside the house behind the garage, just a few modest rooms that still carried his father's scent in the walls. His mother was dozing on the worn recliner in the living room, the TV murmuring softly in the background. Jake moved quietly, kneeling beside her. "Hey, Ma," he whispered, brushing a blanket over her legs. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're still up," she murmured. He smiled. "Yeah. Long day." She blinked at him with that hazy look that sometimes meant she was back in the present, sometimes meant she was somewhere years behind. "Did the girl come by?" Jake froze. "What girl?" he asked gently. His mother's voice was barely more than a whisper. The one with the sad eyes. The one who needed warmth. He stared at her, something fragile unraveling in his chest. She had that look, she continued. Same one I saw that night. She's older now, but it's her. I remember her eyes. Jake sat back slowly, heart pounding. His mother barely spoke anymore. Most days she couldn't recall what she ate for breakfast. But now she remembered Elena. He rose and made tea, his hands moving through muscle memory. Every motion, boiling water, the clink of the spoon, the scent of chamomile felt both grounding and surreal. He sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. Elena had found him. She had built a system to find people who showed kindness and used it to trace one old rusted garage and a boy who'd offered soup and shelter. He didn't know whether to be flattered or afraid. The next morning, Jake found himself unable to stay still. He cleaned the garage, not the perfunctory cleanup he'd done to prepare for the bank, but a real cleaning. He scrubbed tools, wiped shelves, cleared cobwebs. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because someone had seen worth in this place again. By noon, a knock sounded on the metal side door. He opened it, surprised not to see Elena, but an older man in a charcoal gray suit, briefcase in hand, standing under the awning. Rain dotted his shoulders. "Jake Miller," the man asked. Jake nodded. "Mr. Doyle, legal counsel for Ardent Capital." Jake narrowed his eyes. "You people move fast." Mr. Doyle smiled, thinly professional to a fault. "Miss Reyes asked me to deliver some documents personally. She wanted to avoid any formal pressure or legal confusion." Jake took the folder the man extended. Inside was a contract, but not the kind he expected. It wasn't about repossession. It was a release of claim. A full transfer of the property back to Jake Miller at no cost. The garage. The land. No strings. "What is this?" Jake asked, flipping pages in disbelief. "A gift," Mr. Doyle said. "Technically a retroactive correction. Miss Reyes believes this property should never have been included in the acquisition portfolio. She's prepared to return it in full if you consent." Jake stared at the words. Free and clear. No mortgage, no obligation. "Why?" he asked aloud. "She calls it a matter of principle," Doyle said. "She also requested I tell you, quote, 'This is not a favor. It's the continuation of something that began with a bowl of soup and a place to sit out the storm.'" Jake laughed, incredulous. "She memorized that. She doesn't forget much," Doyle replied. Jake didn't sign the papers. Not yet. That night he sat with the folder in his lap, the rain tapping soft against the tin roof. He thought about every bill he hadn't paid, every job he'd taken for less than he deserved just to stay afloat. He thought about his mother, fading away one quiet day at a time. And he thought about that girl Elena building an empire on a single moment of warmth. He set the papers aside and pulled out a box from the back closet, old mementos, photos, tools from his dad, and at the very bottom, something he hadn't seen in years. A napkin. Creased-stained but still legible. His teenage handwriting, bold and awkward, Jake Miller, Miller Garage. If you ever need a hand. She had kept her promise. She had come back. And now somehow the past was asking him if he was willing to build a future on that single act of kindness. He looked over at his mother asleep again in her chair. The rain was slowing. For the first time in years, Jake Miller didn't feel like a man watching something end. He felt like someone standing at the beginning of something far bigger than himself. Jake didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed, eyes open, the folder from Ardent Capital resting on the nightstand like a silent invitation to rewrite his life. The words kept echoing in his mind. This is not a favor. It's the continuation of something that began with a bowl of soup. By morning, the rain had stopped. The world outside looked washed clean, as if it too was trying to reset. Jake rose early and made breakfast for his mother, soft eggs, toast, and tea. She ate slowly, carefully, but today her eyes followed him more than usual. He sat beside her on the couch, the old folder still in his hand. "Ma," he said, "do you remember the girl from that stormy night? The one who wouldn't go to the shelter?" His mother smiled faintly. She was scared, but she looked at you like she wanted to believe in something. Jake exhaled through his nose, more emotion in that breath than in the words he hadn't yet said. "She's back. Her name's Elena. And she's something else now." His mother's hand moved slightly, touching his knee. "So are you." Jake didn't answer. He just covered her hand with his own and stayed like that until her breathing slowed into sleep. Later that morning, he stood outside the garage with the folder still unopened. The early sun glinted off the cracked sign overhead, Miller Garage since 1972. Paint peeling metal, rusted, but something about it looked noble, still standing through it all. The sound of tires crunching gravel caught his attention. He turned to see the Tesla again, silent as a shadow. Elena stepped out dressed simply in jeans and a navy windbreaker this time. Her hair was pulled back into a braid. There was no entourage, no assistant, no press. Just her and that same composed gaze. "You came back," Jake said. "You didn't sign," she replied. Jake held up the folder. "I don't want charity." Elena nodded. "Good, I'm not offering any." They stood in silence a moment, the breeze fluttering the hem of her jacket. Finally, she took a step forward. "I want to show you something," she said. "Do you have time?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Let me grab my keys." They didn't speak much on the drive. Elena didn't try to fill the space with small talk, and Jake appreciated that. They drove 40 minutes out of town past cornfields and highway signs until they reached a low building of brushed steel and glass nestled in a quiet business park. A black sign read, "Ardent Labs, Innovation for Humanity." She led him through security and into a sleek, quiet corridor. People moved through the halls with purpose, nodding politely as they passed. Finally, she stopped in front of a glass door marked simply "The Kindness File." The room was softly lit, not cold or clinical. Along the walls were large digital displays, maps, live analytics, interface layouts that pulsed with data in motion. In the center of the room stood a single curved console glowing with soft blue light. Jake stepped inside, unsure what to expect. "This," Elena said, stepping beside him, "is the system I built to find you." He looked at the screen as names and icons flickered by. Locations, timestamps, behavioral clusters. It wasn't just GPS, it was stories. "I designed it to aggregate minor patterns from crisis reports, charity records, shelter logs, even security camera audio metadata. Things that don't seem connected, but form a human fingerprint of kindness over time." Jake stared. "You built an AI to find good people to remember them," she corrected gently. "To make sure kindness doesn't vanish in silence." She tapped a control, and a case file appeared. Subject ID, Ruesiaruesu1, J. Miller, location, Miller Garage, initial event date. October 17th, 2003. Jake's throat tightened. There it was, his story stored in a glowing profile. The girl behind the gas station, the soup, the blanket, a note in silver pen. "You kept that date?" he asked. "I kept everything she said. I started Ardent to solve real-world problems, but this file, this is why I stayed up at night. I didn't want to forget what it felt like to be helped by someone who didn't ask why." He looked at her, then really looked, and what he saw wasn't the billionaire or the engineer. It was the same girl from that night, only now she carried power, clarity, and the fire of someone who had turned pain into purpose. "Why show me this?" Jake asked. "Why now?" Elena folded her hands in front of her, choosing her words with care. "Because people like you build the world quietly, and then lose it just as quietly. I wanted you to know you mattered, even when you forgot, and maybe now you can matter again." Jake felt something inside shift, subtle but irreversible. Not pride, not ego, but possibility. "Why me?" he asked softly. "Because kindness isn't random," she said. "It's rare, but not lost, and it shouldn't disappear when the money runs out." Silence settled between them, warm and heavy. Jake turned back to the screen. His name pulsed there, steady alive in digital memory. "What do you plan to do with this file?" he asked. Elena's eyes glistened, not with tears but conviction. "Grow it. We're launching a public-facing version. People can submit stories. Search for the helpers they never thanked. We'll use it to build scholarships, grants, local support systems. Real impact. But I want you to be part of it." Jake blinked. "Me?" She smiled. "The first name in the file. The man who made me believe people still cared." Jake stepped back from the console, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he wasn't just someone trying to survive. He was someone who had mattered, and someone who could again. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's talk." And with those two words, the future opened like a door, long rusted shut, finally swinging wide into light. Jake didn't speak during the ride back to town. He sat in the passenger seat of Elena's Tesla, staring straight ahead, arms folded, wrestling with a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and unease. The visit to Ardent Labs had cracked something open in him, a door he wasn't sure he wanted open at all. And behind it was the same question that had haunted him since Elena reappeared. Why, him? The sun had already dipped low by the time they turned onto the familiar gravel drive that led to his garage. Dust kicked up in soft spirals behind them. Elena parked the car and turned off the engine. Silence filled the cabin. Jake finally spoke. "Why didn't you just tell me who you were that first day?" Elena looked at him. "Because I wanted to see if the man I remembered still lived here." He raised an eyebrow. "And I think he does," she said. "But I also think he's hiding behind something." Jake laughed under his breath. "You think I'm hiding, lady? I've got bank notices taped to my wall and a mother who barely knows what day it is. What exactly do you think I'm hiding behind?" She didn't flinch. Resentment, pride, maybe fear. Jake opened the door and stepped out. "Thanks for the ride." He heard her door open and close behind him as he walked toward the garage. Her voice followed him, calm but firm. "You didn't even ask about the property transfer, Jake." "Why not?" He stopped back still to her. "Because I don't want it if it's some kind of compensation." "It's not." He turned around slowly. Then, "What is it, Charity?" "No," she said. "It's a reset. A way to honor what this place stood for." Jake shook his head. "What it stood for doesn't pay taxes, doesn't keep the roof from leaking, doesn't keep the lights on. I could help you with that." He took a step toward her. "And then, would I become the mascot for your AI program, the face of your press release about kindness? No thanks. I'm not a project." Elena's jaw tightened, and for a moment the polished CEO cracked. "You think this is about publicity?" "I don't know what it's about anymore," Jake said, quieter now. "But you dropped a miracle into my lap, and I don't trust things that drop from the sky." "I didn't drop a miracle," she said. "I traced one. 21 years ago, you gave something that changed a life. I'm just giving the world back to the man who showed me it was worth living in." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes didn't waver. She meant it. All of it. And somehow that made him even more uncomfortable. "I've spent years keeping this place alive with duct tape and coffee fumes," he muttered. "Now someone shows up with answers I didn't ask for." "Maybe it's time to stop surviving and start living," she replied. The words hit harder than he expected. He looked away, unsure whether it was anger or shame tightening his chest. At that moment, the screen door to the house creaked open. His mother stepped out, leaning against the frame, a robe wrapped around her frail shoulders. "Jake," she called, her voice faint but clear. "You out there?" He turned. "Yeah, Ma, I'm right here." Elena followed his gaze. Her expression softened. "Is it all right if I say hello?" Jake hesitated, then nodded once. Elena approached with careful steps, her voice gentle. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Elena. I was here a few nights ago." Jake's mother squinted eyes, adjusting. "I remember your voice," she whispered. Elena's eyes glistened. "You remembered me, even when I didn't introduce myself. You were cold and small," his mother said. "That night, you cried in your sleep. Jake gave you his last can of soup." Jake turned away, emotion rising too fast. Elena knelt in front of the woman who had once wrapped her in a blanket that smelled like motor oil and lavender. "I never forgot," she whispered. "Not him. Not you." Jake's mother smiled. "You came back." Elena nodded. "I did." A long silence followed. Not awkward, reverent. Later, after helping his mother back inside, Jake returned to find Elena standing at the edge of the garage looking at the faded mural painted along the back wall. It had been his father's idea years ago, a pair of hands cupped around a tiny engine with the words, "Fix what matters." "I always liked that," she said quietly. "Fix what matters." Jake joined her. "My dad believed every broken thing deserved a second chance. Even people." She looked at him. "So, why not give yourself one?" He sighed. "Because I don't know what that looks like anymore." Elena turned to face him fully. "Let me show you. Let's not make this a handout. Let's make it a partnership. I want to rebuild this garage not into a shrine to the past, but a future. a community space, a training ground, a story that keeps growing. Jake met her eyes. There it was again, that fierce calm in her gaze. Not pity, not obligation, vision. "I don't have the energy," he said. "You do," she replied. "You've just spent it surviving." He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Let's fix what matters, Jake. Together." He stared at her. A lifetime of disappointment, pride, and loneliness had built a fortress inside him, but in that moment he felt the first brick loosen. "I'll think about it," he said quietly. She smiled. "That's all I ask." She turned and walked toward her car, but not before pausing at the door. "And Jake." He looked up. "I'm not here to take anything away from you. I'm here because you gave me something no one else ever did, hope. Let me give some of it back." Then she left, her taillights disappearing into the quiet dusk. Jake stood alone in the fading light, surrounded by tools, rust, and the slow tremor of a life-shifting course. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the last man standing. He felt like someone who might still have something left to build. Jake had always believed in fixing things with his hands. Engines, carburetors, busted brake lines, those made sense. They came with parts and diagrams, a clear order of operations. But what Elena had offered, that was something else entirely. It didn't come with a manual. It came with hope, and Jake didn't know where to put something that abstract. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen. Jake poured a mug and stepped onto the porch, his boots creaking against the old planks. His mother was already up, sitting in her chair blanket over her legs, staring out into the morning light. "She came back," she said softly, not looking at him. Jake nodded. "She did," and he exhaled. "She wants to help rebuild the garage. Turn it into something more." His mother's eyes stayed on the horizon. "And what do you want?" That was the question, wasn't it? For so long he hadn't allowed himself to want anything beyond keeping the lights on and his mother cared for. But what if there was more? Before he could answer, a small voice called from across the yard. "Mr. Miller." Jake turned to see Liam, the kid from 2 trailers down, sprinting toward him with a crooked grin and a backpack almost as big as he was. Jake stepped down to meet him. "Hey, buddy." "What's up?" Liam held out a piece of paper, a rough drawing of a robot holding a wrench. "I drew this in school. It's our garage robot. He fixes cars and makes grilled cheese." Jake chuckled, heart softening. "You think we could build something like that?" Liam grinned. "If anyone can, it's you." Jake watched him run back down the gravel path. The boy's laughter echoed like a memory of something long buried, joy, potential, purpose. That same afternoon, Elena returned. No Tesla this time. She walked up the path on foot, carrying a thin portfolio and a coffee for each of them. Jake met her, halfway took the cup, and offered a cautious smile. "Bribery with caffeine. Bold move. I learned from the best," she said. "You bribed me with soup. Remember?" They sat on overturned crates under the garage awning, the smell of gasoline and sawdust mixing with the afternoon air. Elena opened the folder and laid out a set of renderings. Jake blinked. "You already designed something." "Nothing's final," she said. "Just ideas. A co-op workspace. Auto training programs for local teens. A tech station in the back for diagnostics, maybe even EV retrofitting classes. We'd keep the spirit of the place, your dad's tools, your name, but make it sustainable." Jake traced one of the drawings with his finger. "You think people around here would go for this?" "I do," Elena said. "People want to learn. They want to work with their hands. But no one's giving them the chance." He nodded slowly. "It was ambitious. Big, but not impossible." "There's one catch," she added. "Of course," Jake said, sitting back. "Always a catch." She met his eyes. "I want you to run it." Jake blinked. "What I can fund it. Help with the structure, the permits, the tech. But this isn't my story. It's yours. If this place is going to mean something to the people here, it has to be led by someone they trust. Someone who knows this town, knows its heart." He looked down at his hands, still rough and stained from years of labor. I'm a mechanic, Elena. I fix stuff. I don't run youth programs." "You fix people too," she said quietly. "You did it for me. You still do it for the kids around here. They look up to you, Jake, whether you realize it or not." He laughed dryly. "I don't even know where to start." "That's okay," she said. "Start where you always have, with what's broken." Jake's throat tightened. He thought about the high school dropout rate in town, the shuttered shops, the kids like Liam who had nowhere to go after school but broken sidewalks and screen time. He thought about the kids his dad used to mentor, letting them sweep the garage floor and hold flashlights under the hood just to give them a place to belong. And then he thought about that one night 21 years ago when a frightened girl with rain in her hair and shadows in her eyes had stepped into the warmth of a small, messy garage and found something that changed everything. He stood. Elena watched him, searching his face. "I'll do it," he said. A slow smile spread across her lips. "Yeah, but not as a favor," he added, "not as a figurehead. If we're going to do this, it has to be real. For the community, for the kids, for everyone who ever thought they weren't worth rebuilding." Elena nodded. "Then let's get to work." They shook hands, firm, honest, equal. Just as they turned to head inside, a soft crash sounded behind them. Liam had tripped over a pile of bolts sprawling onto the pavement. Jake rushed over, helped him up, checked for scrapes. Nothing serious. "You okay, champ?" Liam nodded sheepishly. "I was going to ask if I could help with the robot today." Jake ruffled his hair. "You just became our first intern." Liam beamed. As Jake led the boy inside, Elena lingered for a moment, her eyes drifting to the sign above the garage. Miller Garage. Since 1972, she whispered to herself, still fixing what matters. And for the first time in years, Jake felt not like a man who had lost everything, but like someone who had found what he didn't even know he'd been missing. A reason to build again. A reason to stay. And this time, he wouldn't do it alone. The next few days moved with an energy Jake hadn't felt in years. Word had spread fast. A billionaire backing the old Miller Garage people in town whispered, guessed, speculated. Some thought it was a buyout. Others thought Jake had struck gold. But most simply hoped it was true that someone was finally investing in this place again, not just with money, but with belief. Jake tried to ignore the chatter. He focused on clearing the inside of the garage, sorting through rusted parts, salvaging what could still be used. Elena visited daily, bringing coffee and blueprints, discussing zoning with the city meeting, quietly with contractors and community leaders. But she never pushed Jake. She just showed up, constant, steady patient. On a quiet Thursday morning, as sunlight filtered through the high windows of the garage, Jake pulled down an old storage box from the loft above the back office. He hadn't looked in it since his father passed. It was dusty, heavy, marked in black ink C. Miller. Archive. Inside were Polaroids from decades ago, pictures of his father standing beside beat-up Buicks and Chevys, grinning with grease on his hands, faded receipts, notes from customers thanking him for honest work. And near the bottom, wrapped in a brittle manila envelope, Jake found something he didn't expect. A silver pen. The same one he used that night. The one he'd given Elena with the napkin. Jake froze. He sat down on the bench, the pen cradled in his palm, and everything rushed back in full color. The storm. The way she'd flinched when he stepped outside. The torn sleeves of her hoodie. The trembling hands when he handed her the soup. How she hadn't cried until he gave her the blanket. He remembered how she refused to go to the shelter but clung to the little metal stool near the heater like it was the last safe place in the world. He remembered the moment he wrote his name and address and gave her the pen. Just in case you want to find your way back. He had no idea back then how much that moment would mean. To her. Or to him. Jake stood, hand tightening around the pen. He knew what he had to do. That afternoon, he asked Elena to meet him not at the garage but at the diner on Main Street, the one that served real cherry pie and hadn't changed its wallpaper since 1986. She arrived wearing jeans and a light jacket, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. No driver, no fanfare. They sat in the back booth. Jake ordered coffee for both. For a long moment, neither spoke. He slid the silver pen across the table. Elena looked down, and when she picked it up, her fingers trembled ever so slightly. "I found it this morning," Jake said. "In my dad's things. I forgot how much that night mattered. Not just to you, to me." She traced the pen's barrel with her thumb. "It was the first thing I ever owned that felt like a promise." Jake swallowed hard. "I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a kid trying to help." "But you did help," she said softly. "And not just that night." Jake leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Tell me the rest, Elena. I want to hear it from you. Everything that happened after." She nodded. "After I left your garage, I walked for hours. I remember the cold and the dark, but I also remember the way your blanket smelled motor oil and lavender. It was the first time I felt safe in months." Jake smiled, blinking fast. "I ended up near the old Lutheran church on 9th, she continued. They had a food pantry. A volunteer there called a foster coordinator. I was placed with a family in Denver. It wasn't perfect, but they cared. You stayed in touch with them for a while, but I outgrew the system fast, got a scholarship, worked 2 jobs through MIT, started Ardent at 24. Jake shook his head, slowly awed. "And you never forgot that night." "No," she said, meeting his eyes, "because it reminded me that the world wasn't all broken, that one small, unrequested kindness could rewrite someone's story." They were quiet again. Then Jake asked the question he hadn't dared before. "Why did you really come back?" She didn't hesitate. "Because no one ever came back for me," she said. "Not until you. You didn't even know me, and you gave me warmth and dignity. I wanted to prove that not only does that kind of kindness matter, it multiplies." Jake looked at her, and for the first time the weight he'd been carrying for years, disappointment, regret, quiet sorrow, felt just a little lighter. "I think my dad would have liked you," he said. "I think he already does," she replied, smiling. Later that night, back at the garage, Jake pulled out a ladder and climbed to the sign above the office door. The old wooden board that read Miller Garage had begun to crack. With a marker and a steady hand, he added 3 small words beneath it. "Fix what matters." And as he climbed down, Elena stood watching from the driveway, hands in her pockets, eyes bright. "You remember now?" she asked. Jake nodded. "Everything." And the wind that moved through the rafters wasn't just a breeze, it was a memory returning home. By Saturday morning, the old Miller garage looked more alive than it had in years. Sunlight streamed through freshly cleaned windows, the scent of dust and oil replaced by lemon cleaner and fresh paint. The old rust-colored tool cabinet gleamed with polish, and Elena had installed a whiteboard in the back room to begin mapping out the future layout learning stations, a small classroom space, a workshop for teens. Everything was in motion. Jake felt like a man standing in 2 worlds. One foot still anchored in the life he knew tools grease solitude, the other edging into something much bigger, something hopeful. He'd spent so long fixing machines he'd forgotten what it felt like to rebuild meaning. That morning, Elena arrived early, carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees and a bag of fresh bagels from the bakery downtown. She greeted Jake with a soft smile. "I figured the founder deserves breakfast," she said. Jake gave a small laugh and took the cup. "I'm still not used to being called that." "Well, better get used to it. Tomorrow we meet with the city board about zoning. Monday the contractors start, and I talked to the high school principal. She's excited about launching the after-school apprenticeship program." Jake whistled low. "You don't waste time." "I learned not to," Elena said. "Time doesn't wait. Neither should we." They sipped coffee side by side on the loading dock in easy silence. That's when they heard the commotion. A shout, then a crash. Jake was up in seconds, bolting toward the front of the garage where he'd left the bay door partially open for ventilation. Outside in the alleyway, Liam was on the ground. Jake's heart stopped. The boy was pale, one arm twisted beneath him, his bike lying several feet away. A small puddle of blood darkened the gravel where his knee had torn open. Liam Jake dropped to his knees beside the boy. Liam whimpered, trying not to cry. I was going to show you the new drawing. I took a shortcut. Jake examined him carefully. His knee was bleeding badly and his elbow was scraped deep. More worrying, the boy was shaking borderline in shock. His breathing was rapid. "It's okay," Jake said softly. "I've got you." Elena knelt beside them without hesitation, pulling out her phone to call emergency services. Jake didn't wait. Years of muscle memory kicked in. He grabbed the first aid kit from the wall, cut away the pant leg with a pocket knife, and applied pressure with gauze while murmuring calming words. His hands were steady voice sure, even as his pulse pounded. The siren was distant, but growing. Elena stood back watching him, not just the way he worked, but the why. The look in Jake's eyes wasn't panic. It was fierce, focused care. The same look he'd had the night he gave her soup and a blanket. A fire truck pulled into the alley, paramedics rushing forward. Jake stepped back only when the professionals arrived, letting them take over. He stayed nearby as they checked Liam's vitals and loaded him into the ambulance. Before they closed the doors, Liam looked up at Jake. "Am I still your intern?" the boy whispered. Jake smiled, eyes glassy. "You just got promoted to assistant foreman." The doors shut. The ambulance pulled away. Jake turned to Elena. His hands were still stained with blood, his knees dusty from the gravel. He looked shaken, but also steady. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just hate seeing kids get hurt." She looked at him, her voice soft. "You saved him, Jake. If you hadn't been here." Jake rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling hard. He shouldn't have had to go through that. "This alley's not safe. That shortcut. It's the only way some of these kids get here after school." Elena's gaze sharpened. "Then let's make it safe. We'll petition the city for better lighting. Maybe pave the walk." Jake looked at her. "You're serious? I'm always serious about protecting the people who show up," she said. He watched her for a moment. The way her eyes shone not with fear, but with fire. Not with charity, but with conviction. Then Jake spoke quietly, but clearly. "I want to expand the program." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Already, I want more kids," he said. "More than just a workshop. A mentorship pipeline. Auto mechanics, electronics, trade skills. Things that give them a path like this garage gave me one. Like it gave you." Elena's face softened. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Jake turned, looking at the old garage now alive with the scent of paint and dreams. "No," he said. "But I'm sure it's worth it." That evening, Jake stopped by the hospital to check on Liam. The boy was doing well, some stitches, a brace, nothing broken. His mother, tearful but grateful, hugged Jake tightly. "You were there when it counted," she said. Jake nodded, heart full. He's got a good future. Let's make sure he gets there. On his way out, Jake walked through the quiet hospital corridor past rooms filled with patients, nurses, lives in flux, and for the first time in years, he felt part of something larger than himself. Not a man watching the world go by, but a man building something in it. When he stepped outside, Elena was waiting beside her car. Jake smiled at her through the soft glow of the parking lot lights. "We're not just fixing engines anymore," he said. "No," she replied. "We're fixing futures." And in that moment, the past wasn't something to mourn. It was something to build on, together. Sunday morning arrived quietly. The sky was pale and gentle, the kind of soft blue that only appeared after a long rain and a long silence. Jake stood alone inside the garage, sunlight catching on the tools he had hung meticulously along the pegboard. The floor had been swept twice. Everything was clean ready. He was restless. Elena hadn't come by that morning for the first time in nearly a week. Jake wouldn't admit it out loud, but he missed her presence, the way she moved through the garage like she belonged, the way she always saw 10 steps ahead without missing what was right in front of her. She wasn't just rebuilding his garage, she was rebuilding him. He was pouring another cup of coffee when the knock came. Not Elena this time. It was Mr. Doyle, the attorney, who had first brought the deed transfer, holding a simple envelope in his hand and wearing that same perfectly pressed suit. Jake, the man, greeted him. "She asked me to give this to you personally. Said it wasn't something she wanted to send by email." Jake accepted the envelope, confused. It wasn't sealed, just folded with his name written in long, elegant cursive. Inside was a letter. The ink was blue, slightly faded, as if it had been written years ago. It had. Jake, if you're reading this, it means I finally found you. Or rather, it means I finally let you see how long I've been trying to. I wrote this letter 10 years ago when I got my first real office. It was small, barely bigger than the back room of your garage. I was 23, broke and terrified. But I had this memory that kept me going, a boy with grease on his hands and more kindness in his heart than anyone else I'd ever met. I thought about sending this to you then. I even looked up Miller Garage on Google Maps, but the place didn't come up. I worried maybe it had closed. Maybe you'd moved on. Maybe I'd imagined you all along. But I never stopped remembering that night. I never stopped trying to build something worthy of the kindness you gave so freely. And if you're holding this now, it means I finally got to give something back. Thank you for being my reason, for being my reminder that love can come in the form of soup and silence, that protection can come from strangers, that family isn't always blood. It's sometimes a boy who writes his name on a napkin because he doesn't know how else to offer hope. You mattered, Jake, more than you'll ever know. Elena. Jake read the letter twice, then a third time, and when he was done, he sat in the office chair his father once used, holding the pages like they were something sacred. No one had ever written to him like that. No one had ever told him he mattered like that. He hadn't even known he needed to hear it until the ache in his chest proved otherwise. That afternoon, the town felt different. Maybe it was the breeze or the sunlight, or the way Jake walked through it with the quiet awareness that something inside him had shifted. He made his way to the small community park behind the elementary school, the place where Elena was scheduled to meet with the city outreach director about youth programming. When he arrived, she was already there. Not in a blazer or heels this time, but in sneakers and a gray hoodie hair and a braid clipboard in one hand and a dog-eared copy of Start With Why in the other. She looked up as he approached. "Hey." Jake said nothing at first, just handed her the letter. She recognized it instantly. "You read it," she said. He nodded. "It's the most honest thing anyone's ever given me." She hesitated. "I meant to send it a long time ago. I just didn't know if it would be too much." Jake chuckled softly. It wasn't too much. It was just enough. Elena's expression softened. "I meant every word." Jake looked at her, and this time he didn't look away. "I know you did," he said, "and I think I needed to read it more than I realized. Not just because of what you said, but because it reminded me that who I used to be. He's still in here, somewhere." "You never stopped being him," she said gently. They sat down on a nearby bench beneath a large oak tree, a late summer breeze rustling the leaves above them. Elena broke the quiet. "I think part of me came back here because I wasn't just looking for you. I was looking for home." Jake nodded slowly. "Funny. I've been living in one place so long I didn't realize how far I'd drifted. From what he took a deep breath. From myself. From hope. From believing that something good could still come out of this old life." Elena looked out toward the horizon. "I think kindness has a way of circling back. Not always fast, not always loud, but it finds you when you're ready for it." Jake turned to her. "You came all the way back for a boy with nothing but a blanket and a can of soup." She met his gaze, and found a man who still gives more than he realizes. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was deep, sacred. After a while, Elena stood. "I should get back. I promised the principal I'd email the proposal tonight." Jake rose too. "You're not staying long this trip, are you?" She hesitated. "I fly back Tuesday. Board meetings." He nodded. "Of course." She studied him. "But I'll be back. I've got a garage to help rebuild." "Remember," Jake smiled. "I'll hold you to that." As she turned to go, Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. It was the napkin, the very same one he'd written his name on 21 years ago. A little yellowed, a little fragile, but still intact. "I found this too," he said. Elena froze. Her eyes filled as she took it, holding it like a piece of her own childhood had returned. "You kept it," she whispered. "I guess some promises stick better than we think." She pressed the napkin to her chest for a long second before slipping it into her bag. Then she looked up at him. "I'll see you soon, Jake." And with that she walked away, the setting sun catching her silhouette like a scene from a memory that would never fade. Jake stood there long after she was gone, heartful hands empty but somehow feeling more whole than he had in decades. Some letters don't need to be mailed. Some are meant to arrive exactly when the soul is ready to receive them. Jake stood before a room full of people in pressed shirts and clipboards. It was Monday morning, and he was at City Hall, something he hadn't done since renewing his mechanic's license 5 years ago. He felt out of place, hands, rough boots, dusty as flannel shirt creased at the collar. But beside him stood Elena, composed, confident, and unmistakably prepared. She'd emailed him the proposal 2 nights earlier. He had expected a short outline. Instead, it was a 30-page vision document, architectural renderings, phased timelines, grant eligibility projections, and even a tentative partnership plan with the local high school. At the center of it all was one core value printed in bold on page 1: fix what matters. Jake had underlined it 3 times with a ballpoint pen before putting the pages down. Now he was staring at a long wooden table with 6 city officials seated in a line. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued. One man in the back, Mr. Garrison, the zoning coordinator, watched him like a hawk. His expression said, "Convince me." Jake cleared his throat. "I'm not a speaker. I'm not polished. But I've lived here all my life. This garage, it's not just where I work. It's where I learned to become someone people could count on, where I learned to fix more than broken engines. I want to give that same chance to the kids in this town." He hesitated, his palms damp. Not all of them will go to college. Some won't even finish high school unless they find a reason to stay connected. I want this garage to be that reason, a place where they learn how to rebuild something with their own hands and believe they can rebuild their lives too. He stepped back. The room was silent. Elena picked up where he left off, her voice clear and steady. She detailed the educational partnership, the mentorship rotations, the community engagement strategy. She had answers for every concern: insurance, permits, ADA compliance. But she didn't speak over anyone. She spoke with purpose and clarity. When they finished, there was a pause. Then Mr. Garrison leaned forward. "This is an ambitious plan, Mr. Miller, especially for someone with no background in education or nonprofit management." Jake nodded. "You're right. I've never run a program like this. But I've taught a dozen kids how to change brake pads, rebuild carburetors, wire electrical systems. I've kept this business running with duct tape and borrowed time, and I've been the kid who thought no one would ever come back for him." He glanced at Elena. "I got lucky once," he said. "Someone did come back. Now I want to be that someone for somebody else." Garrison looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. A woman beside him smiled. "Let's vote." By that evening, approval had been granted, a 6-month provisional program pending results and review. Jake held the letter in his hands like it was something sacred. Elena was waiting for him outside, leaning against her car, arms folded and grin wide. "Guess you're officially a program director," she teased. Jake shook his head. "If I'd known it took this much paperwork, I would have stuck to lug nuts and timing belts." She laughed. You'll learn." There was a pause. Then Jake said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me say no." Her eyes softened. "You didn't say no. You just forgot how to say yes." They stood there in the twilight, neither speaking. But something had changed between them, something unspoken, but undeniable. The next day, Elena drove Jake to Ardent Labs. "This isn't just a tour," she told him as they pulled through the gated entrance. "I want you to see what the kindness file is becoming." Inside, the building pulsed with quiet energy designers, engineers, social workers, all working in tandem. Elena led him to a conference room filled with screens, maps, and data visuals. One of the interns brought up a new case file. A teenage girl, homeless after aging out of the foster system. But based on her last known location patterns, the kindness file AI had predicted a high probability she'd visit a specific train station in Tulsa where a former volunteer had once offered food and blankets. "We intercepted the pattern last week," Elena explained. "Sent a social worker to meet her at the station. She's now in transitional housing, enrolled in a GED program." Jake stared at the screen. Because of a memory, Elena nodded. Because someone was kind once and our system learned how to follow the echo. He stood quietly absorbing it all. A system built on compassion. A machine learning to trace goodness. He looked at Elena. "You built something that remembers what people forget. I built something because you reminded me not to forget." He exhaled slowly. "And now you want this file to go public." She nodded. "Soon. We're almost ready. People will be able to submit their own kindness stories. Track people they never thanked. Build community logs of silent heroes." Jake swallowed. "And you want me to be a part of it?" "I don't want," she said. "I need." He didn't answer immediately, but something in his chest stirred. For so long he'd been trying to keep his world from collapsing. Now he saw what it looked like to help rebuild a larger one. "I'm in," he said quietly. "For the garage, for the kids, and for this." Her smile said everything she didn't. That night, Jake returned to his house and found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, a soft light falling across her folded hands. She looked up at him with the clarity she only had on her best days. "You look lighter," she said. "I think I am," Jake replied, setting his keys down. She gestured to the napkin on the table, the one Elena had left for him years ago now, neatly pressed between two panes of glass framed. "Still, fixing what matters?" she asked with a small smile. Jake bent down, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Starting to." And for the first time in a long, long time he felt like the man his father had raised him to be. Not just a mechanic, but a builder of better days. The hum of progress now echoed through Miller Garage. The peeling paint had been replaced by a fresh coat of soft blue-gray. The cracked windows were now clean panes with the words, "Miller Garage, Fix What Matters," hand-painted in gold leaf by a local artist. Every corner of the building bore signs of renewal. New light fixtures, reinforced walls, and a small reception desk made of reclaimed wood. But it wasn't the new materials that made the space feel alive again. It was the people. High schoolers came in after class, some timid, others full of too much energy but nowhere to put it. Jake greeted each one by name. They weren't students. He refused that word. They were apprentices, and they were his responsibility. Each teen had their own workbench now. Liam, in a knee brace but more energetic than ever, wore a custom lanyard that read, "Assistant Foreman." He took his duties seriously, handing out tools, double-checking torque specs, and correcting anyone who left grease on the handles. Elena dropped by regularly but never hovered. She knew this wasn't her stage. She simply stood in the wings watching the sparks fly, literal and metaphorical, as the teens sanded metal, rewired headlights, and slowly learned how to build more than engines. One Friday afternoon, as the kids packed up their projects and headed out, Jake caught Liam lingering by the front bay door. "You all right, kid?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. Liam hesitated. "Can I ask you something kinda big?" Jake nodded. "Shoot. If I keep coming here." And I keep learning. Does that mean I won't end up like my dad? Jake froze for a moment, towel crumpled in his hand. He'd met Liam's father once, a man who had stumbled into the garage asking for a tire patch and left with an angry outburst when Jake gently turned him away for being too drunk to drive. Jake knelt so he was eye level with the boy. "Listen," he said softly. "Where you come from. It's a part of your story. But it's not the whole book. What you do now, that's how you write your own pages. And from where I'm standing, you're already doing that." Liam's face brightened a flicker of something Jake recognized belief. "Okay," the boy said quietly before trotting off to join his waiting mom outside. Jake stood there a while longer, the moment sinking deep. That night, Elena invited Jake to a small gathering, just a few close staff from Ardent Labs, some city partners, and a couple of local nonprofit leaders. Nothing flashy, just a quiet evening under string lights in the backyard of her rented cottage at the edge of town. He hesitated at first, but she'd looked at him that afternoon with her signature steady gaze and said, "You've earned your place at the table. Stop acting like you're waiting for an invitation to your own story." So he went. The garden glowed with warm lantern light. People mingled, sipping tea or wine, laughing softly. Elena moved through them, effortlessly offering introductions and warm smiles. Jake stood near the fence nursing a soda when a woman from the school board approached him. "You're Jake Miller, right?" He nodded. "My nephew's one of your apprentices. He talks about the garage like it's Hogwarts." She chuckled. Jake grinned. "Well, I can't promise magic, but we do weld a mean bumper." She touched his arm. "You're doing something special. Don't let anyone downplay that." Later, as the evening wound down, Elena found him seated on the back steps watching the stars emerge. She sat beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "I saw you talking to Miss Holland," she said. "She said I run a magic school." Elena laughed, soft and warm. "Well, you do teach people how to transform." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt comfortable earned. Then Elena spoke again, voice low. "I'm not staying in Silicon Valley much longer." Jake turned to her surprised. "I've already handed over most of the operations. The Kindness File team can run independently now. I've built what I needed to build there." Jake frowned. "Where does that leave you?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "Wherever I can keep building things that matter." A pause. "I want to be here more," she said. "Not just to visit, to stay, to help grow the garage, and whatever else might grow." Jake's heart caught in his chest. For years he'd shut doors before they even opened. But now one stood wide before him and all he had to do was step through. "I'd like that," he said, voice rough. "More than you probably know." She smiled. "I think I do." The following week, Jake was up early. The garage was quiet, the sun just rising. He made coffee, then walked to the wall behind his father's old workbench. There he hung a new frame. Inside was a photo Elena Liam and 3 apprentices standing proudly around a half-finished engine block, hands smudged with grease grins wide. Below it a brass plaque read, "Because kindness deserves to be remembered." Jake stood back, hands on his hips. The garage wasn't just alive again. It had a future. And for the first time, so did he. The first snow of the season fell softly, like forgiveness. It blanketed the streets in a hush, covering the town in quiet grace. Jake stood just outside Miller Garage, the cold air reddening his cheeks, his breath visible in short puffs. The sign above the door gleamed against the gray sky, Miller Garage. Fix what matters. Below it, a string of lights glowed warm against the cold. Inside, the sound of laughter and tools echoed like music. It was the grand opening of the new Miller Community Auto Workshop, a dream months in the making. The garage had been transformed into a space that honored its roots but pointed toward the future. One bay still bore the familiar smell of oil and rubber, but others now held workbenches built for small hands, shelves of protective goggles, and a whiteboard outlining the week's schedule of lessons. Jake moved through the crowd, shaking hands with old neighbors, nodding to city officials, and catching smiles from parents whose children now called this place their second home. Liam stood beside a rebuilt electric scooter, proudly explaining the circuitry to a wide-eyed reporter. The boy's brace was gone now, but he still walked with a slight lean, a reminder of where he'd started and how far he'd come. Jake's mother had been brought in by wheelchair earlier that morning. She sat near the heater in the corner, wrapped in the same quilt Jake had grown up with. Her eyes followed him wherever he went, filled with a quiet pride that needed no words. And then there was Elena. She stood near the garage's central column, speaking with a small group of community leaders. She wore a simple winter coat and a wool scarf, but she radiated the kind of presence that turned heads without trying. When her eyes found Jake across the room, her smile widened. Slow, real, meant only for him. She walked over as if she'd always belonged there. "This turned out better than I imagined," she said, voice soft beneath the chatter around them. Jake chuckled. "That's because I let you handle the budget." She nudged him with her elbow. "You handled the heart." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the apprentices demonstrate how to safely jack a car frame and reattach a bumper. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "I just didn't want the place to die." "You didn't just keep it alive," she said. "You gave it a soul again." He looked down humbled, then said, "I think I finally understand what my dad meant all those years, about fixing more than machines." Elena tilted her head. "What do you think he meant?" Jake turned his gaze, sweeping the room, the kids learning, the parents hopeful, the team of volunteers pouring coffee and handing out toolkits. "I think he meant that when you fix something broken, you help someone believe they're worth fixing too." Elena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small and familiar, a folded napkin, now preserved in a clear plastic sleeve. "I wanted to give this back to you," she said. Jake blinked. "You kept it. I never stopped," she said. "That night it was all I had. And when everything felt like it might fall apart again, I'd take it out and remember that there was someone once who didn't walk away." Jake looked at the napkin, his name, his handwriting, his address, and felt tears prick the backs of his eyes. Not from sadness. From a deep, overwhelming gratitude that someone had carried his kindness like a compass through a storm. He took her hand in both of his, gently closing her fingers around the napkin. "No," he said. "You keep it. Not because you still need it, but because it's part of how this all began." She looked at him, quiet emotion rippling behind her eyes. Jake took a breath. "You came back for me, Elena. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was waiting for you too." The moment stretched between them, not dramatic, not flashy, just right. The kind of moment that doesn't need fanfare because it is earned. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. Their kiss wasn't the start of something, it was the affirmation of what had already grown steady and true. It was warmth, meeting warmth, finally. When they pulled apart, a cheer rose from the crowd behind them, not for the kiss, but for the ribbon-cutting ceremony beginning at the far end of the room. Jake grinned. Time to make it official. They walked to the makeshift stage where the city mayor held a pair of comically large scissors. Jake was handed a mic he never asked for, but didn't resist. He looked out at the crowd. People of every age. People who remembered what the garage once was. People who could now dream of what it would become. He cleared his throat, his voice a little rough but certain. 21 years ago, I gave someone a place to stay warm for a night. I thought it was small. I thought it would be forgotten. But kindness, he said. Pausing to look at Elena has a funny way of finding its way back. He glanced toward the apprentices gathered near the tool racks. This place is proof that even small acts matter, that we're all fixable, that what's broken isn't the end, it's just the beginning of something stronger. The room erupted in applause. Jake raised the scissors, sliced through the ribbon, and with that Miller Garage was officially reborn. That evening, when the last guest had left and the lights dimmed, Jake and Elena stood at the threshold watching snow fall gently against the parking lot. Inside, the space was quiet again, but no longer empty. Elena turned to him. What's next? Jake took her hand. We keep fixing what matters. And under that old wooden sign beneath a sky full of stars and a town full of new hope, Jake Miller finally understood. He hadn't saved a girl in the rain all those years ago. She'd saved him, too. And together they'd saved something bigger than either of them had dared to imagine. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far kindness can travel. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, take care, and keep believing in the power of small kindnesses.